Hey crew, it's Ben, and I'm back on another Bible study. And today we're going to be diving back into Exodus. If you are unfamiliar with what I am doing in Exodus, you should probably start at the top. You should probably go back to Genesis because I hold some very other unconventional beliefs, and I would genuinely hate if your feelings got hurt. With that being said, we are going to dive into Exodus 15 because we have stopped at Exodus 14, and we are just reading the Bible as it says and talking about the points that come up along the way. And a lot of the points that come up along the way do not seem to hit the same points that we've been taught our entire lives. I'm speaking for myself, but let's dive into Exodus 15. Exodus 14, they have just performed the human sacrifice of Pharaoh and all of his people. There is a whole lot of death just happened in order to exalt. And now we have a song. The song At the Sea. This is referenced in Judges, but then Moses and the Israelites sang this song to the Lord. I will sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. The horse and rider he is thrown into the sea. The Lord is my strength and my song. He has become my salvation. He is my God, and I will praise him, my Father's God, and I will exalt him. The Lord is a warrior. The Lord is his name. Pharaoh's chariots and army he has cast into the sea. The finest of his officers are drowned in the Red Sea. The depths have covered them, and they sank like a stone. Your right hand, O Lord, is majestic in power. Your right hand, O Lord, has shattered the enemy. That's funny. I thought it was Moses' right hand. But it's a matter of fact, he was the Lord here specifically told Moses, don't bother me with it. You go handle it. So, there's that. You overthrew your adversaries by your great majesty. You unreleased your burning wrath and consumed them like a stubble. Burning wrath, huh? Well, they got drowned. That's not burning. I know. It's hyperbole. It's whatever. But again, it's not accurate. And at the blast of your nostrils, the water piled up. Like a wall, the current stood firm and the depths congealed in the heart of the sea. I don't know that I spent enough time talking about the fact that they were stopped across from the mountain of Baal, the wind god, in order to receive this east wind. That is something that you really need to pay attention to because the worship of a Baal and the things that he does comes into play a lot more later on in the story. But right now, they were told to stop in front of Baal and wait for the divine judgment. I'm just saying. And the Baal is one of the ones who require sacrifice. It's one of the entities throughout history that has required people as its sacrifice. Keep that in mind. That is mighty funny that they stopped in front of his mountain and performed the sacrifice of Pharaoh and his armies. At the blast of your nostrils, the waters piled up, and the wall of currents stood firm. The depths congealed in the heart of the sea. The enemy declared, I will pursue, I will overtake, I will divide the spoils, and I will gorge myself on them. You stole them from them. They're not taking spoils. They came to get their stuff back. You were thieves who took off in the middle of the night after killing everybody's firstborn child with all the gold and the silver in the land and all the living livestock. So yeah, they were chasing you. Now, we've talked extensively about why I don't think that if the miracles happened the way that they're described, Pharaoh would have he would have been like, go away, or he would have converted on the spot. There's no way he was charging the ball of fire. It's not going to happen. There's no way he's going through the middle of the Red Sea. Like he has already had this ball of fire charge at him and stop in between them. And now he's going to walk through the middle of the Red Sea. Are you out of your mind? Let's look at the Red Sea real quick too, because honestly, there's only really two places that you have the Gulf of Suez and pretty much anywhere in this area it could have been. And then you have all the way down at the bottom of the Red Sea, the outlet into the Arabian Gulf. That's the only places, or the Gulf of Aden. This is the only places that you can possibly pull that many people. That's the wrong one. I want this. Because this is the 35 mile journey. Let's pull it in close. And we'll look at the numbers here. Like, this is where, historically, they say this is where they passed. Now, this is all the way almost into subcontinental Africa where things get a lot greener. Why would you go to the desert if you've got 500,000 people? But this is a 20-mile hike with 500,000 people in, let's say, 10 hours. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt that it's spring and it stays dark, and they made it before daylight, remember? And it started at twilight. So they made it during dark in the middle of the night with, well, I say 500,000, with 3 million people, right? We're assuming that number. I've talked about why, but with 3 million people, they just walked across this 20-mile stretch of seabed. You may not understand why this is such a big deal, but if you've never been on a march, you can force march effectively 12 to 15 miles. You can really push yourself and do 20 to 25 miles in an extreme situation with a group of people, like a squad or a regiment. But to take 3 million people and move them 20 miles in this tight, like they had to been scooting and booting, boss. They were shooting it across that water. And then if you get to the point, like this other spot where they say, they're trying, like I've seen the argument that they crossed here. Well, let's look at that. That is 130 miles. This is one of the narrower parts of the sea, right? And so what we're talking about here is not humanly possible. It is not humanly possible for 3 million people to march across any point except for the top and the bottom. It's not even possible. You cannot make that many people walk that far in a day, like much less within a night. You can't. It's not even possible. Like maybe if they all had chariots and everybody was mounted, not even then. Like no, because then you're looking at 50 miles. So again, you're looking at an impossibility in the middle, right? Now, I don't believe, I've discussed that, but I don't believe they came all the way down here close to Ethiopia and into the Djibouti. I don't buy that in the slightest. So I do believe that they crossed here. That's coming into play because let's look here. This is the Bible map. This is where they say all of these things happen. And you got Marah here and Elim here. This same article where this map came from says that this spot right here is 63 miles from Sinai, which is right here. That's not even close to true. Like, looking at where they're talking about is roughly right here. That's 400 miles. That is not 63 miles. 63 miles from Sinai is going to be right about here. Right? And so this is not correct. Again, we're looking at it like there's no way that this is correct. They have Mount Sinai down here. I don't believe that. I've talked before about how he was at Midian. He was a Midianite, right? Noah, you can say he was an Israelite. You can say he was an Egyptian, but the place that he chose to live was Midian. And this right here is Midian. This little spot of desert right to the east of the Gulf of Aqaba, right? And so this is the area he was in. This is the area he was returning to. I believe that he probably made his way this way to Egypt the first time, or when he returned. And so Mount Sinai, let's go ahead and pull up my places here. Where's it at? Right here, projects, interesting places. We're going to go ahead and make this visible, and we're going to show where I believe these things are. This is pure speculation on my part. I want to be clear on that. But I think that there are good reasons to believe this. And we have, if they crossed here, which let's say they started here and they went here, that's 25 miles. That is a doable, hard forced march. 3 million people is a lot to get across this area. I'm not sure that they could have room to fit in this part of the peninsula, to be honest with you. Now, maybe they could camp and compress themselves enough to be able to be here. There's not a lot of food. There are people living here. But from this point, they cross here, 25 miles, that's another day. And then if they cross here, let's start new. And if we cross right here at the Straits of Tiran, that's 14 miles. That's another day of not hard walking, but that is an average march. So we're looking at 3 days from the Egyptians to cross over into the southern part of Midian, which I believe is where Sinai is. We talked before about Sinai and how this mountain has unique characteristics, right here, that make me believe that it is entirely possible that this is the spot where things happened. This particular area right here has 2 geometric shapes next to this entire burned part that looks like the wrath of the Lord, the mountain on fire, the burning mountain. Now, it may not have been black then. It may have changed after we get the 10 Commandments. But this is where I believe it is. Because I believe that this is where Sinai is, I believe that Elim is in this area. There's and that Marah is up here. Now, let's talk about Elim and Marah in just a second. Sorry, my kid's on a trip and I had to take that call. So, they sank like lead in the mighty waters. Who among the gods is like you, O Lord? Who is like you, majestic in holiness, revered with praises, performing wonders? You stretched out your right hand and the earth swallowed them up. Moses did, but whatever. Like, I'm going to hammer that point because it is important that God told him, why are you coming to me? Right? This angel that's leading them in the pillar of fire said, why do you come to me? You handle this. You have the power. And still, we get into, you swallowed out, you stretched out your right hand and the earth swallowed them up. The water swallowed them up, not really the earth, but okay. And with loving devotion, you will lead your people you have redeemed. Is that right? Is that right? Loving devotion. That's the adjectives we're going with here, right? The adjective and the verb. That's what we're going with. Loving devotion. All right, we're going to see if there's some loving devotion coming along. We're going to see just how much loving devotion that this God has for his people. And so, with loving devotion, you will lead the people you have redeemed. They're redeemed already. That's interesting too, right? Okay, now redeemed is freed from slavery, true, but it also means freed from sin. Why did he not say the people you have freed from slavery? He said redeemed. There's a reason. The words are important. With your strength, you will guide them to your holy dwelling. So they're going back to the mountain. We just looked at where I think the mountain was. I have very good reasons to believe that it's there and not at the bottom of the Sinai Peninsula. The nations will hear and tremble. Anguish will grip the dwellers of Philistia. Then the chiefs of Edom will be dismayed, and trembling will seize the leaders of Moab. Those who dwell in Canaan will melt away, and terror and dread will fall on them. By the power of your arm they will be as still as stone, until your people pass by, O Lord, until the people you have bought pass by. You will bring them in and plant them on the mountain of your inheritance, the place, O Lord, you have prepared for your dwelling. The sanctuary, O Lord, your hands have established. The Lord will reign forever and ever. Okay, so let's look at this real quick. What he is saying here is different than the rest of the narrative going on. Because the nations that he referenced are not down here in Midian. They're not in the Sinai Peninsula. They're not down here. The nations that he mentions are up here. This is Canaanite. Moab, I think, is right here. It's this area and not this area, which is the area that they wind up in. So the promise of God is not fulfilled here, right? He's not bringing them with loving devotion to the place that they've been promised of milk and honey, where they did not plant anything. But he blames it on them because that's what a narcissist does. The rain will last forever and ever. For when Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and horsemen went into the sea, the Lord brought the waters of the sea back over them. But the Israelites walked through the sea on dry ground. Then Miriam, the prophetess. That's a problem for y'all. Right there. Aaron's sister. That's another one because Aaron's sister is also Moses' sister. And she's a prophetess. Very interesting, right? Took a tambourine in her hand, and all the women followed her with tambourines and dancing. That's interesting, too. Talk to the Baptists about that one. And then sing to the Lord, for he is highly exalted. The horse and rider he is thrown into the sea. Now, I've already talked about how that was Moses and why that was Moses, and God did not want to be involved in it, right? That's the story we got. He's like, you go handle this. Quit making me micromanage the waters of Marah. Then Moses led Israel from the Red Sea, and they went out into the desert of Shur. For 3 days they walked in the desert without finding water, and when they came to Marah, they could not drink the water there, because it was bitter. All right, so we're back into distances, right? Let's pull back down here. They left the Red Sea. We're going to assume that they crossed over into Midian, right? We're into southern Midian. And so from here, a 3-day journey, like this is pushing it for a 3-day journey, but it's possible. Elim's a little bit farther south, but a 35-mile journey, like they could have went all the way up to here, or they could have come all the way down to here, but they did not go any farther down the peninsula. They did not cross over the mountain ranges, right? It's easy to get lost in the desert. If you look, there ain't a whole lot of nothing out here, right? You've got 3 million people and their livestock that you're bringing through this land right here. This is the desert of Shur, right? And so there's not a whole lot of hospitality here. Now, with the technology we have and the understanding we have of hydrology and things, we can have these places out here in the middle of the desert that are growing things. Back then, they did not. That was not a thing, and that it's entirely not possible that they drug that many people through the desert and fed them and their livestock. It's not possible. Now, we're going to assume that it is possible. We're going to assume that they did that so that we can continue reading this. But they didn't. There's no way. Like, not that many people. There's no way they brought that many people. Like, it's not logically consistent all the way back through the story. There's no way that Moses would have, or Pharaoh would have continued oppressing them once the plague started. If you're dealing with 3 million people, if you're dealing with 600,000 fighting men, like you're just not going to do it. And so, especially back in them days, like that's a large force. We've talked about that before. There's no way you're bringing this many people. It's just not even possible. Even with, like, nothing is impossible for God. I don't want to imply that it is, but like, he would have had to start providing manna way before he did. We're going to get to that. Manna and quail from heaven. On the 15th day of the 2nd month after they left the land of Egypt, the whole congregation of Egypt set out from Elim and came to the desert of Sin. Now, I assume that Elim is right here. They assume, according to this bag, that it's way down there, which they could make that. Like, they could make this journey in 2 months. Absolutely. Not even hard. But, like, my only problem with that is that they're talking about this. Now, if they did set out for Elim, and they did, I don't think they intentionally did if they did. And if Elim actually is down here, then yeah. But I do believe, where was it at? I thought that I heard a place, maybe it's farther down, but I thought that there was a reason why I only went this far, because that's like a day away, right? And it's Sweetwaters, but I could be completely wrong on the putting of Elim here. They could be right, but they're not right that it's only 63 miles. It is entirely possible that they came this far down the Sinai Peninsula and then got stopped, because this part actually starts to get pretty populated. There is actually a good bit of greenery and people on the western side of this mountain range. And so they would have started facing some resistance. Now, if they got 600,000 fighting men, there's not a whole lot anybody's going to be able to do. That is an enormous population for the time. That is an enormous army for the time. Most of the battles in this time would be lucky if they had 1,000 people. And so 600,000 people battling is a big deal. They could have went, instead of going down to Elim and heading south, they could have went right up into the land. But they didn't. God didn't lead them there. He didn't tell them go there. He said, no, go to Elim. And so that's what they did. They went down. And there in the desert, they all grumbled against Moses and Aaron. If only we had died by the Lord's hand in the land of Egypt, they said. There we sat by pots of meat and ate our fill of bread. But you have brought us out of this desert to starve this whole assembly to death. Now, again, we get into it's hard to believe, right? Simply because they have been led through so many miracles already. If this is the true, infallible Word of God, they have seen time and time again already that God's going to take care of it. And then the Lord said to Moses, Behold, I will rain down bread from heaven for you. Each day the people are to go out and gather enough for that day. In this way I will test whether or not they follow my instructions. Then, on the 6th day, when they prepare what they bring in, it will be twice as much as they gather on the other days. We got a problem. Don't know what it is? Where's the Sabbath? We haven't had it established yet. Like, you can make the argument for Genesis when God rested, but the official establishment of the Sabbath comes later in this book. So already they're observing the Sabbath, but they don't have the Sabbath. And again, maybe I'm misremembering. That is entirely possible. I do that, but I don't think so. I'm pretty sure they don't have any of the law yet. We've talked about that quite extensively, how they're not following the law that they will be given later, but God is blessing them anyway. And so now we're here, and God is going to provide for them. He's going to give them food from heaven. Okay? It's bread. Okay. On the 6th day of the prayer, so Moses said to all the Israelites, This evening you will know that it was the Lord who brought you out of the land of Egypt, and in the morning you will see the Lord's glory, because he has heard your grumbling against him. For who are we that you should grumble against us? Don't blame us, blame the giant ball of fire. If you're going to get mad at the angel. We didn't do this. They told us to do it. So much just past the buck happens in this. It's really crazy that we've held on to this as a moral standard, as infallible for as long as we have. It's really amazing. And then Moses said to Aaron, Tell the whole congregation of Israel, Come before the Lord, for he has heard your grumbling. And Aaron was speaking to the whole congregation of Israel. They looked towards the desert, and there, in a cloud, they saw the glory of the Lord appear. He's not leading them anymore, I guess. So he's going to come in, and they see him coming. Maybe that's why they were doubting, because he left. Like, they haven't seen enough already. They're like, no, he left, it's gone, there's no more God, right? And then the Lord said to Moses, I have heard the grumbling of the Israelites. That's 3 times he's talking about grumbling. And then tell them in the twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. Then you will know that I am the Lord your God. And because that is 3 times, we're going to go ahead and pop that word out. I want to see what that means in particular. Grumbling. All right, let's see what we got here. In the sense of obstinacy, a grumbling and a murmuring. It is only used in Exodus and Numbers, and it's grumblings of the people every time. So, okay. Exalted and lofty. That's weird. So they're thinking they're above God, maybe? That's what the problem is? And that, at twilight you will eat meat, and in the morning you will be filled with bread. And then you will know that I am the Lord your God. That evening quail came and covered the camp, and in the morning there was a layer of dew around the camp. And when the layer of dew had evaporated, there were thin flakes on the desert floor, as fine as frost on the ground. And when the Israelites saw it, they asked one another, What is it? For they did not know what it was. And so Moses told them, It is the bread that the Lord has given you to eat. This is what the Lord has commanded. Each one is to gather as much as he needs. You may take an omer for each person in your tent. That's a unit of measurement. We're not going to pop it out. It's not that important. And so the Israelites did this. Some gathered more and some less. And when they measured it by the omer, he had gathered too much, had no excess, and he who gathered a little had no shortfall. Each one gathered as much as he needed to eat. And then Moses said to them, No one may keep any of it until morning. But they did not listen to Moses, and some people left part of it till morning. And it became infested with maggots and began to smell. So Moses was angry with them. Every morning, each one gathered as much as was needed, and when the sun grew hot, it melted away. This is interesting because, first off, God is a God of provision. Right? God is a God of manifestation. God is a God of, you bring this into your life. And so what he brought to them in order to save them, like, maybe you live in the extreme south and you're not sure just how thin frost is, but frost is pretty thin. And to go out and gather frost, like, it's not cold, so it's not going to melt, but still, you're going out and gathering the dew dried into this, and you go out and gather a jar of it to eat. And then it turns to maggots in a day. That's interesting, right? I wonder what fly eggs look like. The Sabbath was observed, and on the sixth day they gathered as much food, 2 omers per person. And all the leaders of the congregation came and reported this to Moses, and he told them, "This is what the Lord has said. Tomorrow is a day of complete rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. So bake what you want to bake, boil what you want to boil. Then set aside whatever remains and keep it until morning." What are you baking? What are you boiling? You're receiving direct provision from the Lord God Almighty himself. You're getting manna, and you do so for 40 years. So what are you baking? What are you boiling? Inconsistencies. So they set it aside until morning, as Moses had commanded, and it did not smell or contain any maggots. "Eat it today," Moses said, "because today is the Sabbath to the Lord. Today you will not find anything in the field, and for 6 days you may gather, but on the 7th day, the Sabbath, it will not be there." He had to go restock. And on the 7th day, some of the people went out to gather, but they did not find anything. Then the Lord said to Moses, "How long will you refuse to keep my commandments and instructions?" They don't have them yet. They don't have them yet. We haven't made it to Sinai. We don't have the commandments. We don't have the instructions. Inconsistencies. "Understand that the Lord has given you the Sabbath. This is why on the 6th day he will give you bread for 2 days, and on the 7th everyone must stay where he is. No one must leave his place." That's interesting, right? Why is it important that they don't go outside? That's what he's saying. No one should leave his place means don't go outside. Every 7th day. And so the people rested on the 7th day. I wonder what was happening while they were told to be inside. "And now the house of Israel called the bread manna, and it was white like coriander seed and tasted like wafers made with honey. And Moses said, 'This is what the Lord has commanded. Keep an omer of manna for the generations to come, so that they may see the bread I fed you in the wilderness when I brought you out of the land of Egypt.' And so Moses told Aaron, 'Take a jar and fill it with an omer of manna. Place it before the Lord to be preserved for the generations to come.' And Aaron placed it in front of the testimony, which we don't have yet, to be preserved just as the Lord has commanded Moses. The Israelites ate manna for 40 years until they came to a land where they could settle. Loving devotion. They ate manna until they could reach the border of Canaan. Oh, and it just gives the 10th of an F out of this. So, what have we learned? That God has provided them something that will turn into maggots within a day. That's impressive. You know how long it takes to breed flies to make them hatch out? Like 2 or 3 days. And so, yeah, okay. Now, it takes rotting meat to make maggots. Or rotting something. So, this bread, like, I don't believe I've ever seen a maggot on bread. Like, I really don't. I don't believe I've ever seen a maggot on bread. They like the putrefaction of meat. The putrefaction of meat and blood. And the guy who's giving it to them, that guy, he's in charge of that. That guy, he deals a lot with death and sacrifice. He deals a lot with blood. He deals a lot with making deals, working with blood. And so we have several inconsistencies here. Some of this was speculation. We've talked about that. Most of it's just reading the book. And the inconsistencies that come through doesn't really have anything to do with me. Let me fix that. I never really wanted to do this, right? I've talked about that before. I didn't want to be the one out here doing this, but if nobody else is going to do it and God tells me to do it, then I'm going to do it. And so I have no choice but to point out these inconsistencies and logic flaws and some other very troubling things that we will get into more as we go along. And so it was important to point out the fact that they stopped in front of Baal. It was. And I know that that will probably upset a whole lot of people because they're like, God's not Baal, but maybe the one they're serving is, right? Maybe the one they're serving is the one that they're told not to serve later. We also always get told and assume that they pick up the religion where they go. But maybe that wasn't the case. Maybe they were doing it and maybe it changed. We will get into that as we go along. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion to a very complicated topic. I know that what I am doing here is stepping on a lot of toes. I know that what I am doing here is breaking a lot of the things that we have held dear. Like I personally have held dear for my whole life. I don't take pleasure in it, but I do have a duty here, and I will continue to do it. I will continue to point out these things until we get through the entirety of the Bible. And we will talk about how pretty much the entirety of the Bible is just to distract you, is just to keep you mad at other people. That's in here. It's like we're told that it's not. We're told that if you're a Christian, then you're supposed to do these specific things, and then we don't do them. But even still, like we're going to get into that later. We'll get into that later. Let me go ahead and wrap this up. Hopefully I brought a little bit of enlightenment and not too much confusion. I don't try to hurt people's feelings, but I understand that it happens. If you're confused by what I have done here, check out up here. I have a playlist that where you go back and you can watch the entirety of the Bible study. You can go back and watch Genesis or Exodus. You can get into the Infinite Integrations playlist. All of these things bring different value to the group. Thanks for hanging out. I appreciate every single minute that you were here with me, and I am praying for you every single day to the real true God. And so, until next time, I love you. You're perfect, whole, and complete just the way that you are, and this has been pittstake. Peace.